Military courtroom, 9:15, and the courtroom was steeped in silence. So thick, so absolute that not even a whisper dared to break it. No one moved, as if fearing that even the smallest motion would shatter the tension hanging in the air like a taut wire, coiling tighter with every passing second. The silence was suffocating, so profound that the rhythmic ticking of the clock behind the judge's bench felt deafening, pressing down on everyone's chest, making even breathing feel like a deliberate act. Every seat was filled, every eye locked onto the man at the center of it all, former Sergeant Alex Turner, sitting in a wheelchair. His uniform was crisp, well-kept, but it couldn't hide the scars of war etched into his body. A faint but unmistakable scar ran from his temple down to his left cheekbone, and his calloused hands rested lightly on his lap, as if holding back a storm waiting to be unleashed. Beside him stood Rex, a Belgian Malinois, his posture rigid, ears perked in full alert. The golden-brown fur of the military gleamed under the sunlight filtering through the tall courtroom windows. But it was his eyes that drew the most attention. Sharp, intelligent, yet carrying something eerily close to Eunice. A case number 247. Turner versus the Department of Defense regarding the ownership of military service dog. Rex, the clerk's cold, formal voice rang out, pulling everyone back to the present moment. No one in the room truly knew what would happen next. They only knew that whatever unfolded today would change a life, or perhaps more than one. Under the dim light of the chamber, Lieutenant Alex Turner took a slow, steady breath. Willing his voice not to waver, he glanced down at Rex, the Alsatian curled up by his feet, then lifted his gaze to meet the judge's. "Your Honor," Alex began, his voice hoarse but unwavering, "the Rex is not just military property. He saved my life." His words hung in the air, raw and unfiltered, gripping the room in a silence even heavier than before. Alex knew that to them, these officials, these men and women in suits, Rex was just another military asset. They didn't understand. They didn't know that this dog was the reason he was still alive after that brutal ambush on the border. Rex had fought beside him through blood-soaked firefights, through endless nights. In the hell of war, Rex had pulled him from a burning armored vehicle, kept him conscious when death was knocking at the door. And now, the military wanted to take him away, to strip him from Alex's life, reducing him to a mere reusable assetter rather than the living, breathing soul who had saved his. A sharp bang of the clerk's hand against the desk jolted him back to the present. "Sergeant Turner, this is the final hearing. Do you have anything to say before we issue a ruling?" His eyes burned, not from weakness, but from the sheer pain of losing Rex. This wasn't just a dog. This was his partner, his rescuer, the only constant in his nights plagued by memories too dark to face alone. For a moment, the courtroom remained still. Then, a voice from the military's side cut through the silence. "Military working dogs are not personal property. Rex belongs to the government," he called, unyielding. The battle for Rex had begun. Alex gripped at the armrests of his wheelchair, his fingers trembling with rage. "A property." His voice was low but seething. "Did you just call a living being, loyal soldier, property?" Rex let out a quiet growl, sensing his handler's fury. But the military officials across the room remained unfazed. The judge adjusted his glasses, his sharp gaze sweeping across the courtroom. "This is not a battlefield, Lieutenant. I need reason, not emotion." The air thickened, heavy with unspoken tension. Alex knew he couldn't lose. But against the cold, unfeeling weight of military regulations, how could he win? The silence stretched. Alex lifted his head, his eyes unwavering. He knew that one wrong word, one misplaced argument, could cost him Rex forever. But just as he opened his mouth to speak, Rex suddenly tensed. A deep, rumbling growl vibrated from his chest, his sharp eyes scanning the room for bristling. A chill crawled up Alex's spine. In all their years together, Rex had only ever reacted like this in the presence of danger. It was an instinct honed by war. Something or someone was threatening them. Right now, Alex inhaled deeply, forcing himself to push the Eunice aside. His focus returned to the impassive faces of the tribunal. They didn't see Rex for what he was. A soldier. A savior. The last piece of Alex's life before the war. Your Honor, Alex began, his voice steady but urgent. The Rex is not just a combat tool. He's my partner. He has saved my life. Not once, but many times. His grip on the Welcher tightened as memories surged forward, flames roaring, bullets whizzing past, the searing pain of shrapnel tearing through his flesh. He had nearly given up, his blood staining the burning sand beneath him. But Rex hadn't left him behind. He had dragged Alex from the wreckage of a burning armored vehicle, shielding him from gunfire, keeping him alive until reinforcements arrived. Alex swallowed hard. When I came home from war, I wasn't myself anymore, he admitted, his voice quieter now. Like he was confessing a truth the world had ignored. But the nightmares, the sleepless nights, the feeling of being trapped between two worlds. Rex was the only thing that kept me tethered. He's not just a dog. He's my family. He paused, glancing at Rex. The Malinois stood firm, loyal and alert, as if he understood his fate was being decided in this very moment. "I'm not asking for sympathy," Alex continued, his voice burning with conviction. "I'm asking for justice. Let Rex stay with me. Let me return the loyalty he has given me." Alex could see it. Some members of the audience lowered their heads. Some wiped at their eyes discreetly, but none of it mattered. Not as much as the unreadable expression on the judge's face. Did they understand? Would they give him and Rex a chance? Before the judge could speak, a sharp, guttural growl cut through the tension like a blade. "Rex." The sudden noise sent a shockwave through the room. Every muscle in the doggoose body tensed, coiled tight like a spring ready to snap. Then, in a single, powerful motion, Rex yanked the leash free from Alex's grip. The force jolted Alex back, his wheelchair rolling slightly from the impact. The sound of the metal chain rattling against itself was drowned out by the chilling scrape of claws against the wooden floor. Rex lunged. Before anyone could react, the Malinois had planted himself squarely in front of the judge's bench. Front paws dug into the ground, her bristling like a warrior preparing for battle. He barked. The barks rang through the chamber, not frantic, not panicked, but sharp, commanding, a warning. The entire courtroom froze. A bailiff instinctively reached for his holster, his fingers brushing the grip of his gun. Another officer muttered urgently into his radio, calling for backup. "Here, Rex." Alex's voice cracked, part panic, part fear, not of the dog, but of what he was sensing. Because deep down, Alex knew. He had seen this before. On the battlefield, in dust-covered alleys where enemies lurked in the shadows. Rex wasn't just barking. He was warning them. A ripple of whispers spread like wildfire through the tense, suffocating courtroom. "What the hell is going on?" Someone blurted. "Is it detecting something?" Near the front, a tall, broad-shouldered bailiff, his navy uniform crisp, a polished badge gleaming against his chest, stepped forward. His eyes were locked onto Rex, his movements slow measured, the kind of approach meant for handling dangerous animals. His hand hovered over his sidearm. "Control your dog. Now." The officer's voice was low, firm, edged with caution. "No air," Alex shot back, his own voice tight with urgency. His grip tightened on his wheelchair's armrests. His breath measured. His eyes never left Rex. "He doesn't react without reason." The officer's gaze narrowed. "You're saying your dog just sensed something?" The room held its breath. Alex swallowed hard. Something was very, very wrong. Alex nodded, forcing his voice to stay steady despite his racing breath. "I've seen him do this before. On the battlefield, he never growls unless there's real danger." The room fell into a single, sharp beat of silence. Doubt twisted into unease. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. People on the back rows shifted uncomfortably, some leaning away as if they, too, could feel the invisible threat Rex had sensed. The dog's growl deepened low, guttural, a sound that didn't just warn, but promised something far worse. His eyes remained locked on a single, unseen point in the courtroom. Not the door, not anyone near Alex. The jury box. A slow, menacing snarl rumbled from deep within Rex's chest. It wasn't the sharp bark of an alert. Was something more primal. A confirmation, the threat was already here. The shift in the room was instant. People recoiled slightly, their gazes flicking nervously in the direction Rex was fixated on. The nearest bailiff instinctively tightened his grip on his holster, while another pressed his radio, whispering an urgent message. But Rex didn't flinch at the movement around him. He lifted one paw, then took a slow, deliberate step forward. His body radiated pure, focused tension. Every muscle coiled, every fiber of his being locked onto something unseen by human eyes. His nose wrinkled slightly, taking in deep, measured inhales. Then his growl sharpened. His target was set. Not the door. Not the judge. The last row of the jury box. The energy in the room shifted. So taut it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every set of eyes snapped toward the back of the courtroom, desperately trying to see what Rex already knew. And then all attention fell on one man. A middle-aged man in a gray suit, tall, lean, pale skin. His graying hair was neatly combed, his appearance meticulously polished. But it wasn't his clothes or stature that drew attention. It was his face. His expression, tension etched into his features. It didn't belong to someone merely observing a courtroom hearing. At first, he tried to keep his composure. But then he realized. Rex wasn't looking away. The man's fingers clenched against his thighs, his knuckles turning white from the force of his grip. A single bead of sweat rolled down his temple, catching the dim courtroom light. The unis thickened. His eyes flicked from side to side, his breath quickening. His feet shifted beneath the table, subtle, calculated, looking for an exit. But Rex wasn't letting him leave. The Malinois barked again, sharper, louder, relentless. The sound thundered through the courtroom like the pounding of war drums. The dog's stance lowered, his body leaning forward, taut as a bowstring. The next move was his to make. Alex saw it all. He took a deep breath, feeling his heart pounding against his ribcage. He recognized this reaction, the way a man tensed when he knew he'd been caught. On the battlefield, this was what enemies looked like just before a trained military dog exposed them. Across the room, the tall bailiff picked up on it too. His hand moved off his gun and instead pressed down on his radio. His voice was low, sharp as a blade. "We have a situation," and then Rex moved. No warning, no hesitation. The Malinois launched forward like a flash of lightning. Claws scraped hard against the wooden floor, the sharp sound ripping through the thick silence. "Rex, no!" Alex shouted. Too late. A bailiff barely had time to raise a hand in alarm before Rex was airborne. His entire body coiled like a missile locked onto its target. Bam! The man in the gray suit collapsed backward, crashing to the floor. His chair toppled over, the sharp clatter drowned by the explosion of screams from the courtroom. Rex latched onto his arm, his powerful jaws clamping down on the fabric, yanking violently. Repeat. The sound of tearing cloth was followed by the dull clink of something metal hitting the cold wooden floor. Gun. For a heartbeat, the entire courtroom froze. Then, gun. He haste go to gun. The bailiff's shout shattered the silence. Panic erupted. People screamed, ducking down, scrambling away from the chows. Bailiffs drew their weapons, aiming them at the man on the ground. "Dead we upon. Hands in the eye no." The man on the sprawled on, eyes wild with shock as the pistol skittered out of his reach. He moved to grab it. Snap. Rex let out a ferocious snarl and clamped down harder on the man's arm, pinning him to the ground. Everything had happened in seconds. Alex gasped for air, his heart racing out of control. Rex had just saved everyone in this courtroom. If he hadn't acted, who knew what that man had planned to do. Then the man on the floor screeched, his voice shrill, filled with something more than pain. "They're coming," he howled. "You can't stop them. You have no idea what they want." A chilling hush fell over the room. Every eye locked on to him. What did he mean? And then Alex understood. He didn't need to ask, because the man's wide, frenzied gaze wasn't on the bailiffs, the judge, or the gun he had lost. It was on Rex. Alex's chest tightened. He looked down at his loyal companion. Still standing firm, his breath heavy, his sharp eyes never leaving the man on the floor. The bailiff pressed harder, his grip bruising. His voice was cold, demanding. "A who? Who's coming?" But the man just laughed. A quiet, unsettling, unhinged laugh. Then, he licked his lips and whispered, "He the ones you can't stop?" A chill rushed down Alex's spine. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. With absolute certainty. The judge, still recovering from the chows, finally found his voice. His tone was sharp, commanding. "What the hell are you talking about?" The man smirked, tilting his head just slightly. And then his gaze locked onto Alex. "You think you saved him?" he murmured. "We've been watching you for a long time. What we want isn't you. It's the dog." Silence. Not the heavy, tense quiet from earlier. This was different. Darker. Final. A bailiff grabbed the man's shoulder, shaking him roughly. "Say it. Who the hell are you talking about?" The man let out a soft chuckle, then suddenly leaned forward, whispering something into the officer's ear. The reaction was instant. The officer's face drained of color. His grip loosened, his eyes widened in disbelief. "No. No, that's not possible." He barely whispered it, his forehead beating with sweat. Alex felt like something had clamped around his throat. This wasn't just an attack. This was a plan. Something bigger. And at the center of it all. Rex. Rex barked. A warning. Alex spun around. Rex wasn't looking at the man anymore. He was staring at the courtroom doors. A heavy wooden door shuddering. The movement was faint, but in the absolute silence, it was as loud as an explosion. Someone was trying to get in. Slowly, the nearest bailiff drew his weapon, raising a hand to signal for silence. Every breath in the room was held. Every eye turned to the door. Rex deep. Loud. His entire body was rigid, musk-coiled, ready to launch. Thick. The door cracked open. Just an inch. No one had time to react. A gloved hand slipped through the door first. Then a figure, tall, draped in black. A long coat billowed behind him as he stepped inside, his face obscured beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. Immediately. "Stop!" And hand is up and no. A bailiff snapped his gun up, finger tensed over the trigger. The intruder didn't stop. Didn't even slow down. Rex howled. A sound so sharp, so primal. It sent shivers through the room, and then he lunged. At the same moment, the intruder lifted his head. Cold light flashed in his eyes. And a slow, knowing smile curved across his lips. "It is time." His voice was smooth, almost amused, like the chows around him was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. People stared. Waited. He simply sighed, shaking his head at the panic unraveling around him. "No one needs to get hurt," he murmured, his tone eerily calm. "Even not here to fight." But no one relaxed. No one believed him. The nearest bailiff took a step forward, gun still locked on the intruder. "Then why the hell are you here?" His voice was sharp, demanding. For the first time, the man turned his head slowly, deliberately. And then, his gaze landed on Rex. The air thinned. Pure, suffocating stillness, like the entire room had been sealed in ice. "Him," the man said. His voice dipped lower, rich with something unreadable. "Aim here for him." Silence. Alex's fingers dug into his wheelchair. A cold dread slid down his spine like a blade. Rex, he barely breathed it. Rex did bark. Didn't grow. But his entire body was wired tight, locked in pure, unwavering focus. He was watching the man, reading him. The stranger inhaled deeply, gaze flicking to Alex. You have no idea what this dog really is. Alex went still. His breath hitched, his fingers clenched harder around the armrests. And then, his voice came out steady, unshaken. No one is taking Rex. A statement, a promise. His voice didn't waver, didn't break. He's not just a service dog. He's my partner. My family. The man in black let out a slow, measured sigh. His lips curled just slightly, almost amused. But his dark eyes, they flickered with something else. Something dangerous. I don't think you understand. Carter, the way he said the name smooth, deliberate, sent a new kind of unease twisting in Alex's gut. This dog doesn't belong to you. The man's voice was patient, but beneath it, the edge was clear. He belongs to us. Alex's fist clenched. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. What the hell are you talking about? Rex is a soldier. He fought beside me. He saved my life. Alex's voice was sharp, unwavering. Beside him, Rex growled, his stance low, muscles tensed like a wild wolf ready to strike. His fur bristled, every fiber of his being locked on the man standing before them. But the intruder didn't flinch. He didn't show fear. Instead, he studied Rex, calculating. Cool, methodical. I don't have time for long explanations, the man said. His voice shifted, clipped, decisive, leaving no room for argument. All you need to know is this. If I don't take him, you're all in danger. A chill gripped Alex's spine. Aho, he barely whispered the word, his throat dry. Aho's in danger. The man smirked. And then, his dark eyes hardened. Everyone, outside, the sharp wail of police sirens cut through the heavy silence. Flashes of red and blue flickered across the frosted courthouse windows. Inside, the air thickened. Something was coming. As things flickered, the pulse. Then another. Shadows deepened. Like something was interfering with the power. The room felt heavier. Then, the doors creaked open again. 2 figures stepped forward. Their silhouettes eclipsed by flickering light, slow, unwavering. They moved with purpose, like hunters who had already marked their prey. Both were clad in dark coats, their faces obscured beneath shadowed hoods. But the true reason the room turned ice cold wasn't their presence. It was what they carried. Beneath the folds of their coats, each of them gripped a weapon. Silenced pistols. Concealed. But ready. The first intruder, the man who had spoken, finally exhaled. His voice was calm, too calm. Let's not make this difficult. A thick wave of unease crashed over the room. People whispered. Shifted. A judge, a man who had spent decades presiding over the law, clutched his desk, his knuckles white. Someone covered their mouth, suppressing a shaky gasp. Even the armed bailiffs hesitated, because this wasn't just a courtroom dispute anymore. This was something else. The man in black took a single step forward. We only want the dog. A ripple of panic coursed through the spectators. They weren't here for money. Not revenge. Not even a person. They had come for Rex. One of the newcomers let his gaze sweep the room, his voice smooth, controlled. Everyone stays calm. Outer for his fingers brushed the grip of his weapon, hidden beneath his coat. No one needs to get hurt. But if anyone does something stupid, I cannot promise I will stay patient. Rex snarled. Not a growl. A warning. His sharp gaze locked on every movement, every breath, every shift in posture. Alex's jaw tightened. His anger burned. This wasn't just a threat. This was something bigger, and he wasn't about to let them take Rex. I told you. Alex's voice was cold as steel. No one is taking Rex. For a moment, silence. Then, a flash of movement. A gun raised, pointed straight at Alex. Screams. The intruder's eyes locked onto his target. His finger tightened around the trigger. And then, claws. Pure instinct. The sound of nails scraping against the wood. The sheer force of a body launching forward. Revved. Faster than the gun. Faster than thought. Drop the pawn. A bailiff shouted. Too late. The gunman didn't stand a chance. Snap. Rex's teeth sank into his wrist, deep. Brutal. A sickening crunch as bones shifted beneath pressure. The man screamed, his hand convulsing. The gun clattered to the floor, skidding out of reach. Rex didn't stop. With a single, lethal twist he yanked. The attacker lost his balance. Slam! He crashed backward, his body hitting the wooden benches with a brutal thud. His face twisted in agony, eyes wide with panic. But Rex was relentless. There would be no second chances. With a growl that shook the room, Rex leaped again. Two powerful front paws slammed in the man's chest. He hit the ground hard, head cracking against the wood. The air rushed from his lungs in a ragged gasp. Then teeth. Rex's jaws clamped down, this time on his shoulder. A piercing scream. Ailey Ayahuk. No. Fairla back. The other two intruders froze. But they had no time to react. Bailiffs surged forward. One was tackled to the floor, his face slammed into the wood, his hands yanked behind his back and cuffed. The other twisted, fought, but he never stood a chance. He was forced into a chair, wrist pinned down, a bailiff holding him firm. The courtroom was Chow's. Screams, orders, the snap of cuffs locking into place. But in the middle of it all, Rex stood tall, unshaken, unyielding. His paws planted firm, his piercing amber eyes scanned every movement, every breath, ready for any sign of defiance. He had fought before, he had survived war, and today, he had won again. The courtroom slowly settled, the Chaws had passed, but the weight of what had happened still hung thick in the air. The intruders restrained, cuffed and dragged away. Left behind a room full of stunned faces, people whispered, their hushed voices rippling like waves against the wooden walls. And then, bang! The judge's gavel cracked against the bench. Silence. His voice, usually firm and commanding, now carried something else. Tremor of disbelief. Gaze shifted. First, then to Rex, the dog that had just saved their lives. Alex was still on the floor, arms wrapped tightly around Rex's body. His fingers dug into his thick fur, gripping onto the one thing that had never let him down. Rex turned, pressing his nose gently against Alex's hand. Silent reassurance. Even after everything, the anger, push, the fight, Rex had never wavered. Alex exhaled a deep, shaky breath. He had never felt safer than he did at this moment. With Rex beside him, the judge let out a long, measured sigh, like a man arriving at a difficult but inevitable decision. He picked up his pen, signed the document in front of him, then looked back at Alex. Based on everything that has transpired here today, his voice was firm now, certain. I have no doubt about Rex's role in your life, Alex. You said he was your partner, that he was irreplaceable. And today, I have seen it with my own eyes. The judge met Alex's gaze, his decision final. I hereby grant you full legal ownership of Rex. For a second silence. Then the room erupted. Applause thundered through the courtroom. Veterans in the crowd stood clapping fiercely, some with tears in their eyes. Alex blinked rapidly, the heat behind his eyes burning. He had waited so long to hear those words, and now they were real. He bowed his head, pressing his forehead gently against Rex's. His voice broke, just above a whisper. We did it, buddy. We're together. Forever. Alex stepped out of the courthouse, Rex at his side. The dog's tail wagged, but his sharp eyes remained alert. If he knew his mission wasn't over, sunlight spilled across the sidewalk, warm and golden. People rushed to congratulate Alex, hands clapping his back, smiles breaking through the tension of the day. Reporters had arrived, shoving cameras and microphones forward, calling his name. But Alex didn't care. There was only one thing he wanted. To take Rex home. Alex pushed open the door to his small house. Rex rushed inside, tail wagging as he paced the living room, sniffing corners, marking his territory once more. Then, he turned back, watching Alex, eyes familiar, full of life. Alex chuckled. He stepped forward, crouching down, running his hands through Rex's fur. You remember this place, old man? He murmured, Rex let out a soft whine, pressing his head against Alex's chest. Alex exhaled, leaning back against the couch. The fight to keep Rex had been long, brutal, exhausting. But it was worth it, because now, he wasn't alone. The sleepless nights, the ghosts of the battlefield, the weight of memories that never truly faded. All of it, eased by the warmth of a familiar presence, a heartbeat steady and strong resting against him. A silent promise spoken through the quiet press of a paw against his hand. They had fought for each other before, and now they would never have to fight alone again. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window. The curtains fluttered, the soft rustling barely breaking the stillness of the room. Rex stretched, his body unfurling before he curled up again at Alex's feet. With a deep breath, he exhaled slowly, as if he, too, understood. After everything, after the battles, the uncertainty, the fight to stay together, they had finally found peace. Alex smiled. He reached down, running his fingers gently behind Rex's ear, scratching the spot he knew the dog loved most. Rex let out a small, contented sigh, pressing his head against Alex's leg. For the first time in a long time, Alex wasn't afraid of tomorrow. He wasn't alone. His voice was quiet but steady. Unbreakable. Welcome home, buddy. We're never leaving each other again.